Hi, this is Asta at Pilot, and I'm here with Staszek Kolarzowski, co-founder and Chief Revenue Officer at Pilot. Before we start, Staszek, can you please tell me a little bit about Pilot for people who are unfamiliar with it?
Sure. So in Pilot, we help US-based companies with payroll compliance and benefits for their global workers. So if you want to hire someone in the country, we can help you with the logistics, paperwork, payments, and benefits. We are a fully distributed team, almost 50 people working from, I think, 15 countries right now. And we don't have any office, everything is location independent.
Yeah, we're located in multiple continents by now, right? Most continents except Antarctica.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We have people everywhere. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
In most of the time zones as well.
What are Pilot's values?
That's a good question. Something that's super important for us is transparency. We really believe that everyone should have as much information as possible. And one thing is it's about the value, but also there's a pragmatic reason behind this. If we work remotely, we all distribute it in different time zones. It's much easier to make independent decisions if you don't have to wait for someone to wake up in different time zone. And to make a better decision, the more context you have, the better. So that's why the transparency is always have been super important to us. I think everything except maybe the salaries is public. So if you want to, look at the revenue numbers or something the financials, that's all public. All the conversations, emails, everyone has access to this. So that's definitely something that's one of the values.
Great. So moving on into talking about our remote work compensation policy, can you give a little bit of background information about why Pilot decided to create this kind of policy?
So when we started, we didn't have any policy. So basically, whenever we wanted to hire someone, we kind of negotiate the salary. We try to find some information online, what could be the salary, but it was extremely flexible, right? So if we really like to work with someone and they had high expectations, we usually try to meet them. So that was happening on the hiring side, but then we had similar situation with promotions. So, people wanted to get a rise, they wanted to be promoted, and we used the same approach. We just negotiated. We've been super flexible. And it has one really big issue. After some time, we ended up with people on completely different compensation levels. So your compensation was more connected to how well you negotiate, not necessarily to anything else. And we had, we had two engineers, and one of them, they've been asking for rise every 4 months, and the other person didn't ask for 2 years, right? And we've been super happy with both of them. So why compensate one person better just because they asking more often? So that was really unfair model. Also, it's made promotions really complex because anytime we wanted to promote someone, hire someone, we always spend hours to trying to figure out the comp and how it should look like. We didn't have any system. And at some point, when you have bigger team, you have people asking for rise every week, right? So every week you're spending hours trying to figure out what would be the best comp. So that's the way we wanted to put some structure and have some philosophy. So anytime we want to hire someone, we wanted to have really simple system to know exactly how much we want to pay, what's realistic, and how we approach this. So this is why we started the whole discussion.
At this time, and this was before my time at Pilot, were the salaries determined roughly based on location, or was it a little bit ad hoc? It sounded since there was no set policy.
Yeah, I think it was roughly based on location, because if you really wanted to work with someone, we just entered the negotiations, and people usually told us what they expect, right? So if we talk with candidates from United States, they had different expectation than someone living in Brazil or Poland, for example. So it was not a conscious decision that we're going to make it location based, because it was flexible and we tried to negotiate with everyone. We ended up with something kind of location based at the end of the day.
Then that wasn't working very well, so you decided to have a formal remote compensation strategy.
Exactly.
And so can you talk about what you ultimately chose to do and how it works?
We actually tried different approaches. We tried location-based model at the beginning, but it had some issues. So after a few iterations, we ended up with something we call a hybrid approach. So how it works with Pilot? We always wanted two people doing the same job to have exactly the same salary, regardless of the location. So our engineer in Poland making exactly the same money as an engineer in Brazil or engineer in the United States. So two people doing the same job, location doesn't really matter. But we didn't go for like full location independent model. What we did is we have different ranges for different departments. So basically what we're trying to do is, for example, all the people in engineering, we try to make those salaries competitive on US markets. But for example, for support, we try to be competitive in Latin America, right? So we just benchmark the roles and departments for different locations. So two people doing the same job, they always will have the same salary. So this is like location dependent, but the whole department, they location dependent. So that's like why we call this hybrid model, because we kind of using a little bit from this model and a little bit from this model.
Why did you decide to do that rather than becoming, for example, completely location agnostic?
With location agnostic is just really hard because you need to find this like one location. And I think you can start with location that's not San Francisco, but then you have a problem because if you really want to hire some part of the team in San Francisco, then you need to raise the salaries for like everyone, the whole company. And for a small company, and we've been bootstrapped back then, it was just financially very hard decision to compensate everyone on the San Francisco level. And again, we could start with a different location, but then you just can't hire people in higher cost of living cities like SF or like New York or even United States, because we could start with European salaries. Yeah, so we couldn't go with this approach of like one salary for everyone, but at the same time, we really dislike the idea that two people doing the same job have different salaries. This never felt right for us. So that's why we try to find like a hybrid solution where we can have cake and eat cake, basically.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you decide which markets to use for which departments?
Again, we started being like very pragmatic. We looked how hard it is for us to recruit people. So basically, if there's like any new role, like any new department, we usually start with the markets with lower cost of living. And we just see how easy it is for like to recruit people, right? So if it's very easy, then we usually stay on this level. If it gets hard, if you cannot attract any talent, then we change the location. Because if you change the location, you can access more markets and you can also be way more competitive on those smaller cost of living markets. So it's just like we start from like the less cost of living countries and locations. And if it's hard to recruit people, we just go up and up and up and up. This is how we started. What we modified after some time is at the beginning, I think we had 6 different location brackets. After some time, like when we started to earn more money and have more revenue, we started to just eliminate the lower markets. And now we only have 3. The idea behind it is if you have some people earning San Francisco salaries, and at the same time you have some people earning Eastern Europe salaries, you may have a situation where like one person is earning 30 times more than like the other person, just because they're in different locations. So we try to eliminate this. And as soon as we can, we just try to always like remove that lowest bracket and just push everyone to like the market above. And we did this a few times, and now we have 3 brackets at this stage.
Can you share what the 3 brackets or markets are?
Yeah, one is United States high cost of living cities. So this is San Francisco, New York. We're using San Francisco most of the time. The second bracket is called US and Western Europe. So this is the market where like we try to be competitive in all the US cities except those high cost of living, but also be competitive in Western Europe. And then the third bracket is Latin America / Eastern Europe. Those markets, they kind of similar. So this is the third one. We try to be competitive in countries like Brazil, Poland, Romania, Czech Republic, Argentina, Mexico. So this is the third bracket.
So my next question is around what considerations you looked at while developing the strategy. It looks like you already touched on a lot of this, but anything else you wanted to add about what you looked at?
The most important thing for us was like, it should be fair for 2 people doing the same job. So that was the most important goal of this. Two people doing the same job should get the same compensation regardless of location. We also wanted to make the whole compensation system and tools so straightforward. Then if you will take 5 different people and ask them to figure out like what's the salary for customer support representative level 2, they all will give you the same answer, right? So as much as flexibility we can remove from the system, that was kind of important for us. Because again, we try to avoid a situation where like people who negotiate better, they have better salaries. That was also pretty important. So the easiest, more straightforward the system is, like then we think it's easier to eliminate the situation where like someone has good negotiation skills and that impacts their salary.
So one of the cons that in our research had come up for location-based models was around when people move from a higher cost of living area to a lower cost of living area, sometimes they would get pay cuts. In the hybrid model, is there a policy around this for Pilot? If somebody moves into a lower cost of living market, that would their salary change?
Yeah, so that's beauty about this model is if you move to a different location, you can still keep the same salary because you're still doing the same job, right? We're not looking at the location.
Okay, so they're still in the same department. I get it.
Exactly. Yeah. So before we had the hybrid model, we had exactly the same issue, which is like someone wanted to move to a different country, and we always had this issue that really didn't want to take the pay cut, which makes sense to me why they don't want to do this. So in this new model, you don't have this problem. You might have a bigger problem if you have people moving between departments. So, for example, you could have a situation where like someone is moving to a different role, but they're getting paid less because this role is aimed for like a different location.
But I guess in that sense, it's still, one could argue that it could still be fair because if you were moving into a totally different department or role anyways, you could expect that you would possibly get a pay cut. So
yeah. If in this department you have other people in the team, that it wouldn't be fair that one person has a different salary because they moved from a different department.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you already touched a little bit on this, but my next question is around what went well during implementation and anything that needed to be improved.
I think we get the tools and the policy right at the beginning. So we created really easy to follow formula how to calculate the salary for like any new role. So that was pretty cool because anytime we wanted to hire a new person, it was very easy to calculate the comp. So I really like that we figured this out because that made everything much easier. So that was great. Another thing that went well was the introduction of the policy. So what we did when we wanted to present this to the team, instead of just showing, hey, this is the policy, how it looks like, what we did is we listed down decisions we made designing the policy. And we walked the team through those decisions and asked for the feedback. So I can give you an example. Like one of the decisions we wanted to make is, hey, 2 people doing the same job, should they have the same salary or not, right? That's the decision we had to make. So we presented this to the team and we're like, hey, this is the decision we had to make. This is how you can do this. This is one way. This is another way. This is why we decided this one, right? And we could have a conversation about this one. And basically, for all those decisions, we just had a really nice explanation why we think we're going to do this way. And it was just much easier conversation because I think if we would just show them the final result, it will be much harder to understand why it looks like this. But when we talked about the decisions of the process, I think it was just much easier for people to be like, oh, I agree that 2 people in the same location should earn the same salary. I agree that the person moving from one country to another shouldn't get a pay cut. It was just much easier conversation. So I remember this introduction of the process this way that went really smooth, I would say.
Great. And any other takeaways from implementation?
I think like this communication is important. So because that was not the first policy we did, and if you just communicate the result, you just come to people and say, hey, we're changing the policy, this is how it looks like. Usually, at least from my experience, it doesn't work too well. And you have a lot of pushback and people don't agree with this. So I think how you communicate this, and compensation is a very sensitive topic, right? So I would spend a lot of time on just thinking how to communicate this to the team, how to talk with the team about this. That's equally important as the policy itself, I would say. And I think many people forget this. They focus, okay, I want to create this policy. They spend a lot of time on this policy, and then they spend 1 or 2 days on the communication. And if you don't have a buy-in for the team, it's just uphill battle to introduce the new policies.
And one of the things that has also come up during our research is that it's not just sort of a set and forget policy, right? And you had mentioned this too, that in the past we had more markets and then now it's down to 3. How often do you think a company should look at sort of revising or reviewing the policy to see if they need to make more changes?
That's an interesting one. So we do the comp adjustment once a year. And I think historically, if we change something with the policies, it was during the comp adjustment. So I think it's very natural. If you think about the comp adjustment, you can also make some changes to the model. So in our case, it was like at least once a year. So this is what I would suggest. I think it works, at least for us. But also, depending on your policy, you may also start hearing like a lot of feedback from a lot of people about like one issue with something in the policy. If that's the case, there's no point of waiting, right? Like if you're hearing this feedback from multiple people every 2 weeks, then you will know that you need to adjust it much sooner.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was there anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to touch on?
You asked like what didn't went well. So maybe what I would just mention is like getting the data is like always challenging. And this is like a big problem. So like even if you have like a right system, you still need to get like the market data from someplace. And that's just a hard problem. It's not a hard problem only for remote companies. It's like hard problem for like I think any company to just find a good data. But there's like a big challenge of this, how you match the data to your roles, like how you do this mapping. Like that's always challenging. So maybe there's like one other problem to remember.
So do you have any tips or solutions for that or resources?
I can definitely recommend pave.com. They have really good data and we're using them. We're using some of like the free databases as well. So we're using PayScale, salary.com, all those that you can just Google. We also released this tool at pilot.co/salaries when we use our own data. So you can check this to see how the market looks like among only distributed companies. So that's something unique about our data set, that like we only work with remote companies and it has data for remote teams only. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. We're also trying to just use as much sources as possible. Ideally, we want at least 3-4 sources per role to figure out like the final numbers.
All right. Great. Well, thank you, Staszek.
Thanks, Asta. Take care.
You too.